You are listening to Lighthearted, the official podcast of the United States Lighthouse Society. My name is Jeremy D'Entremont. Welcome. Today's episode is very different from the kind of thing we usually do, and I'm really excited about it. A couple of months ago, I was looking online for lighthouse poetry, just out of curiosity, and I came across the work of a poet in Scotland named Knotbrook Taylor. It turns out that the Museum of Scottish Lighthouses commissioned Knotbrook to write a book of Scottish lighthouse poems, and the book was published in 2010. He was also the poet in residence for a time at the museum. Knotbrook Taylor is a retired inspector of care services, and he now concentrates on his love of photography and poetry. He has been writing poetry for more than 25 years. His first published collection of poetry, Beatitudes, was launched in 2007 by Blue Salt Publishing. In 2014, he won the Erbacce Prize for his collection Ping-Pong in the Rain. I'm not 100% sure how to pronounce that, Erbacce. I think it's Erbacce, but Erbacce is a publisher that holds an annual worldwide poetry contest. Here is a quote from the Erbacce website about Knotbrook. Quote, "Knotbrook delights in language. It is almost as though he is in love with words and needs to both cherish and almost worship each one," unquote. His love of words, the sounds of words, and their ability to create emotions really comes through in the interview you're about to hear. Knotbrook was kind enough to read a number of his lighthouse poems, as you'll hear. So let's listen to my conversation with Knotbrook Taylor now. I'm speaking today with Knotbrook Taylor, who's joining me from Scotland, which is really exciting. Knotbrook is a poet. We're going to discuss his lighthouse poems in a few minutes. Thank you so much for being with me today, Knotbrook. I really appreciate it.
Hi, Jeremy. Thanks for having me on the show. It's a big honor.
You're so welcome. So I understand you're in Angus in Scotland, that part of Scotland?
I'm in Angus on the east coast of Scotland, yes, somewhere above Dundee, the city of Dundee.
So if you don't mind me asking, Knotbrook Taylor is the name you use. It's the name people will see on your books of poetry and so forth. I understand that your name is not originally Knotbrook, and I'm just curious if there's a story behind that. Before you tell the story, let me tell you what I was thinking about and wondering where you got it. And I was wondering if I think of knot, I think of like a knot in a tree, something very rugged. I think of brook, like a babbling brook, a small river. It's kind of, it conjures certain images, but that has nothing to do with it at all, right?
Completely barking up the wrong tree.
Okay.
Yeah. When I was a boy, there was a program on the telly called The Goodies, and one of the actors in The Goodies was called Tim Brooke Taylor. My name is Tim Taylor. Everyone at school called me Brooke.
Okay.
So when I became a poet, I decided that I needed a better name than Tim Taylor because in Britain it's a famous beer. So I went for Knotbrook Taylor, as in differentiating me from this actor who sadly died now, Tim Brooke Taylor. And I found that actually putting a K on the end gave it a kind of something extra. So it's a name, if you Google it, you'll only ever find me. So
right, exactly. I tried that.
It was a happy circumstance. And it was a way of getting back at all the people at school who called me a funny name, I suppose.
Okay. Well, that's a good story. I like it. Thank you for sharing it. So again, I mostly want to talk about your lighthouse poems and maybe hear some of them. But just a little bit about your background. When and why did you start writing poetry?
Okay. I'm an Englishman, in case you hadn't noticed. I moved to Scotland from the Midlands, the farthest point you can get from the sea in England, when would that have been? 1989, a long, long time ago, to become a social worker. I started comparing a folk club in the local town of Forfar. And one night, a stand-up poet came to perform at the folk club. And I thought, I enjoyed that. I could have a go at that. So I started writing these, funny doggerel poems and performing them at the folk club. And they went down okay, and I did a bit at the Edinburgh Fringe. But at some point, I decided I wanted to get published. And for that, you really needed to study poetry a bit and learn more about it. So I went on an Arvon course up in the Highlands of Scotland with a couple of famous poets, Stuart Conn and Brian McCabe, and learnt the art of poetry and began to write more seriously. And I had my first poem published in 1999. And since then, I've had 4 collections, one about lighthouses, one just a random collection of different poems.
Mm-hmm.
My third book was about, won an award. It was called Ping-Pong in the Rain, and it won an award with the Erbacce company, and they published that. And that was a series of poems where I crashed together different ideas different random ideas and made poetry out of it. And my last book which is called The Year of the Lark, is during COVID, I wrote a poem a day during that first bout of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And I published it on my Facebook page, and then I sent it to my publisher, Erbacce, and they said, "Oh, we like this." And it's a kind of, because my job at the time was working as an inspector of care homes. And as you can imagine, COVID really hit care homes very hard. A lot of people died.
Yeah.
And, at the beginning, we didn't know if we were going to die from it. And there was no injection you could get to give you immunity. So it was quite a difficult time. But the workplace told me to go away and go for a walk every day. So I went for a walk in nature. And this book is like a kind of nature diary, watching spring evolve into summer with a background of the developments in the COVID scenario, if you like.
So I understand you teach a course in poetry.
Yes, I teach a course over the winters in poetry to adults. It's on a Monday night in Forfar. And I like to bring modern poetry to people who don't really know what modern poetry is, don't understand it, don't read it, and think that poetry is this awful rhyming thing that they heard as children. I mean, I don't have a problem with rhyme, but poetry is so much more than that and so much wider. What's important is the message and what you're talking about and how you're trying to communicate.
I saw you do a lot of readings as well. So it sounds like you really think of poetry as something that should be shared and not a private kind of thing.
Yes, I think so. Poetry is about communication, and it's about connecting to other people in the world. Because basically we all have the same concerns, the same issues, the same problems. But poets can look at them in a different way and have a different view of them. And you can see things anew and you can discover things when you read poetry. And it's just beautiful and amazing. American poetry at the moment is really amazing. People like Mary Ruefle and Marie Howe. Check them out if you've never read any of their poetry. Amazing.
Yeah, there's a lot happening in our part of the world that might inspire some poetry. And I see you're also a photographer. Photography looks really interesting.
Yes.
It's almost like visual poetry, it seemed to me, in a way.
Yes. At the moment, I'm very into what's known as ICM. You know what that is?
I do not.
Intentional camera movement. Okay. You work with long shutter speeds and move the camera. And I tend to do it in the winter in the woods when the sun is either setting or coming up. You can make amazing pictures with light.
I looked at your Instagram page, and there's a lot of what you're talking about on there.
Yes.
Very interesting, yeah.
So just another creative outlet.
Sure.
You're a photographer as well, aren't you?
Yeah, you could say that. I take a lot of photographs. Usually a little more straightforward, but now you got me thinking maybe in a new direction here. But
it's about the eye.
So why don't we get into your Lighthouse poems?
Okay.
Let me ask you, were lighthouses an interest of yours before you wrote this collection of poems?
Oh, absolutely. I think I was commissioned by the Lighthouse Museum because the manager saw me at a reading where I did a rather irreverent poem about Stevenson speaking to his mistress.
Hmm.
In fact, Stevenson wouldn't have had a mistress. He tried to ban beer on the building of the Bell Rock
Okay.
because he thought it was, people shouldn't be drinking beer. So the thought of him having a mistress, and that kind of one thing led to another, and they commissioned me to write the book, which
Yeah.
I really enjoyed doing. I got to go and visit the archives in the Museum of Scottish Lighthouses in Fraserburgh, and I don't know if they did it in America, but every lighthouse has a wreck log, so that if there's a shipwreck in your
Oh,
area,
yeah.
the lighthouse keepers were obliged to write down whatever details they knew of it. And these records are still available
Yeah.
and provide fruitful ground for poetry.
Hmm. Yeah, they did do that for a while. Shipwreck logs at American
Yeah.
lighthouses. Yeah. I have seen some of those. Yeah.
A
Interesting.
couple of the poems today come from entries in wreck logs.
And they named you the poet in residence at the Museum of Scottish
Yes,
Lighthouses.
I
Yeah.
was poet in residence for 3 or 4 years, which didn't involve much. It involved going up for a couple of weeks a year to do workshops with children where they would go around the museum and then write poetry on the things that they'd seen. It
Oh,
was fun.
neat. That sounds like a lot of fun. Yeah. And I was going to
I
say, I
got
don't
to
think
spend the night in a lighthouse, which was really good fun.
the lighthouse there at the museum or
The Kinnaird Head Lighthouse,
yeah.
yes, at
Uh-huh.
Fraserburgh.
Yeah, yeah. I was going to say I don't think a whole lot of lighthouse museums have resident poets. I thought that was
No,
pretty cool. Yeah.
there are residences at Start Point, which I think is on Orkney, and people can be a writer in residence there. I've never done it.
So why don't we get into your lighthouse poems? I think it'd be perfect if you're willing to possibly choose a few of your poems to actually read to us. Could that be
Okay.
possible? And maybe tell us a little bit of the background behind them as well.
Yes.
Hmm.
Well, I thought I'd start off with a poem about Ardnamurchan Light. Now, Ardnamurchan Light is on the west coast of Scotland. It's the most westerly point of the British mainland. And this is a good one to start with. This was built in 1849 by Alan Stevenson. I've done my research.
Hmm.
This just shows why I like lighthouses. This is a kind of celebration of lighthouses. What is it about this flashing light and these great big buildings that infuse us so much? It's called Nighttime at the Light. Most west, all night if you wanna. Twice every 20 goes on like a mantra. Step by step, we're climbing the spiral. We're climbing the spiral. There's a star at the top. Comfort, excitement, mackerel, la luna, silver, dark crimson, draws perfect circles. Trippers and dippers, anglers, tanglers, stragglers, screw-ups, compass them all. Songs of Atlantic, song of the siren, stretched into midnight, stretched beyond land. There used to be foghorns. There used to be mermaids. There used to be keepers up there with the light. Tankers and tugboats, humpback and whalers, cool navigation, no beaching, no beaching. If you come here at midnight, it's something important. It's childhood fireworks. It's Custer's last stand. It's succor, it's rescue, it's virile, it's upright, it shows no emotion. But deep down, it's love. Like the Bell Rock and Flugger, the Longstone and Skerries, Cromarty, Cape Wrath, and the mighty Bass Rock. Fanfares from trumpets, it's brave Ardnamurchan, it's a light in the darkness, it's hope It's redemption. Most west, all night if you wanna. Twice every 20 goes on like a mantra. Step by step, we're climbing the spiral. We're climbing the spiral. There's a star at the top.
Mm,
So there you have why I love lighthouses and why I think we all find them exciting.
yeah, that's beautiful. I was thinking, reading, I loved that poem when I read it, but to hear you read it obviously adds a lot, adds a dimension to it. And
Thank you.
of course, this is an audio podcast, so people aren't seeing you, but seeing
No.
you read it adds yet another dimension to it, the emotion you put
Okay.
into it. I'm going to be doing some live streaming video versions of the podcast coming up.
Okay.
Maybe at some point in the future, we can do this again so people can actually see you read these as well. I think that'd be
That would
great.
be interesting.
Yeah, I would love that. And just before you get to the next poem, I'm just thinking how, a lot of people have written poems about lighthouses over the years, obviously.
Yes.
Think of, you mentioned the stuff we learn in school, at least in this country. Longfellow, our poet, early poet, wrote a poem, The Lighthouse. And that is, it's a fine poem. But those types of poems that people have usually written about lighthouses tend to be kind of odes to their beauty and the fact that they symbolize
Yes.
hope and guidance and that sort of thing, which is fine. But it seems like you're looking for something, you might touch on those same themes, but also what's behind the feeling of a lighthouse and the
It's
things people
about
associate.
where a lot of these lighthouses are situated on the edge of things,
Hmm.
on that great emotional thing, the sea, which is inspirational for a lot of artists. And a lighthouse is always by the sea and quite often on a little island in the middle of the sea. And I've never visited one where it wasn't a beautiful setting, to be
Hmm.
honest.
A friend of mine, former president of the U.S. Lighthouse Society, Mike Vogel, when I interviewed him, he said something about how that's where the action happens, where the land meets the sea.
Yeah,
That's the exciting place.
there's
Yeah.
a fancy word for it. Is it liminal? I don't know.
I'm not sure about that. Anyway, didn't mean to interrupt. I'm looking forward to hearing your next poem here.
Okay, well, as we were talking about wreck logs, as I said, each lighthouse recorded when a wreck occurred, and sometimes the only evidence they had that a ship had gone down was stuff washed up on the beach. And this comes from the wreck log of the Butt of Lewis Lighthouse, which might sound funny to Americans, the Butt of Lewis, but it's a red brick lighthouse on the Isle of Lewis out in the Outer Hebrides. And all they found was a chest washed up on the beach with a Bible in it belonging to a William Anderson carpenter of Greenock. And that was found in 1874. And this is me just retelling the story as if I'm coming to it from today. It's called It's Supposed Another Ship Has Perished. William, I have you as a skilled artisan. No callow apprentice, but a full-grown man adept with plane and saw. A man who made things of beauty and usefulness. I say you made this very chest, and who now can contradict me? Bound for a new life in a new town, perhaps a new wife waiting there, full of hope and certainty, your long years of prayers and wood finally paying off. Did you read your Bible in your cabin by the light of a guttering tallow candle? Did you read of Jonah or Jesus? Did you sleep sound in your hammock? William, we don't even know the name of your vessel or why she foundered or even where, in that great expanse of water beyond the Western Isles. It was probably a storm, the same tempest that took the Maya on the same night. 12 bodies washed up so far, said the wreck log. 2,000 tons and 34 crew lost. Did you have time to think of your loved ones? Or were you just trying not to drown amid the towering waves and deadly debris? Did the cold water shock your body? Did it suck the life from you quickly? Or did you have time to ponder your situation? Now I find you, a name in a washed-up chest, described in a dusty and half-readable log in a museum archive. I close the book gently, peel off my white gloves, and ponder all those souls taken by the sea. It was a long time ago, William, and your moment of terror has passed. Ours is yet to come.
Wow. That's far from the usual happy, sunny lighthouse poem from Longfellow.
Well, what struck me about these wreck logs is that how many wrecks there were and how dangerous it was in the days before satellite navigation or even motors in your boat. It was just sail.
Yeah.
And lots of people made a living on the sea, and a lot of ships were wrecked and a lot of people died. We should never forget that was the reason why the lighthouses were put up in the first place.
Yeah, on both sides of the Atlantic, I think a lot of
Yeah.
us have, not descend ancestors who, family members of ancestors who lost their lives. My grandmother had a brother who was lost, who was a fisherman off Nova Scotia.
Yes.
Pretty common.
There's a famous poem called The Wreck of the Iolaire, which was full of World War One soldiers going back to the Isle of Lewis. And within sight of land, on New Year's Eve, this boat hit a rock and most of the people on it died within sight of the people waiting for their loved ones to come back.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a famous poem called The Wreck of the Iolaire. The poet escapes me just now, but
Yeah.
well worth looking up.
Longfellow also wrote The Wreck of the Hesperus, which is not one of his
Yes.
funnier poems. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll do you another one of these wreck logs. It's a little more hopeful. Let me look it up in my book. It's page 31. It's called The Last Voyage of the Maggie. And this one is set against the backdrop of the Cape Wrath Lighthouse, which is on the most northwest tip of Scotland and is on a headland looking straight out into the Atlantic Ocean. And to get there, you have to either walk across the beach at very low tide, or you take a little boat across and then you get a bus up to the lighthouse itself. But this is from the Cape Wrath Light wreck log of 1897, where a small sail-powered fishing boat foundered. And here you might find some rhyme, Jeremy.
Okay.
The last voyage of the Maggie from Hull. Now, Hull is a city on the English east coast, and it must have gone all the way over the top of Scotland to be on the northwest side. The last voyage of the Maggie from Hull. 14 miles off the northwest tip was no time to discover a hole in their ship. They tried for hours to bail and float, but they couldn't keep up. There was little hope. And at 1 a.m. on December 13, the fishing boat foundered. Filling with ocean, its last bell was sounded. The crew had naught but a small rowing boat, and their love of life to keep them afloat. They sat caught way out in the Atlantic night, as their fair lass, the Maggie, slipped away out of sight. Row, said the captain, row for your lives. Think of your children, think of your wives. Over yon is a beacon. I see it flashing on and off. If I'm not mistaken, that's the light at Cape Wrath. Come on, pull. If we all pull together, and if Jesus and Mary sends us calm weather. And they rowed and they rowed and they rowed through the night, always keeping the bow on the light. The swell, it was boisterous, and the wind, it did blow. Though they sweated and heaved, their progress was slow. The beacon was visible, yet never seemed to get bigger. Their resolution was tested, their mettle, their vigour. But in the early glimmering pink of dawning, they could see the white tower as it heralded morning. And they knew in their hearts that somehow they'd survived the currents of chance on the deep Atlantic tide. And as they got closer to under the cliff, hands blistered from rowing, their shoulders stiff. Within the next hour, they made it to shore. At 9 a.m. records show, they made their approach to the lighthouse door. And a welcoming meal from the keepers provided. The crew were exhausted, but their spirit undivided. They set off on the road the next day for Hull, their hometown, and sang songs all the way of how they survived when the Maggie went down.
Well, much happier ending.
Yes. If you can imagine that, 14 miles rowing on the Atlantic Ocean, what are the random chances of that being successful?
I can't imagine. None of us can. Wow.
Just...
A couple of things occurred to me when I was following along in the book I have here with that poem. And I was thinking, your love of language comes through obviously in the poetry, but also your reading of it, your enunciation is very careful and everything, which I love. So I think it's a real love of the word.
I think you've not heard a poem until you've heard the actual poem read by the poet. I think of Billy Collins, a great American poet, or I think of W.B. Yeats, who I didn't get until I heard a recording of his. And then I just got it. It's very Gothic.
Yeah. Too bad we don't have recordings of some of the earlier ones like Whitman would be.
Yes, yeah. Wouldn't that be amazing to hear something like that? Or I think there is Robert Frost recordings, aren't there?
Oh, there are. Yeah, there are. Yeah, and Sandburg, Carl Sandburg. Yeah. Just one other thing before we move on about Hull. Our U.S. Lighthouse Society tour in 2017 spent a couple of days in Hull.
Okay.
And one of the days we were there was a maritime music festival going on. And it was a rainy day. It was a miserable, dark, rainy day, but the festival went on, and there's a little harbor there. The boats were in there. People performed music from the decks of their boats.
Nice.
But there were not many spectators there, which I felt very bad about for the people performing. Sometimes I'd walk from boat to boat, and there might only be a couple of people, listening to some of this music, but it was beautiful. Some of the most beautiful voices I've ever heard, and that really sticks in my memory.
Wow. I've never been to Hull. It's quite a difficult city to get to, isn't it?
Is it? I don't know. I was just riding on the motor coach, so it seemed easy.
It's very difficult to get to from above, from Scotland, because you have to go right round the big firth, as we call them, the big inlet. The big field.
I don't remember that part because I was just riding on the motor coach, letting the driver worry about it and probably sleeping a lot of the way.
Yes. I think next we will acknowledge that lighthouses always went better with a foghorn. So part of my research, I discovered this guy, Robert Fowlis, who actually he was born in Glasgow in 1796, but in 1818 he moved to New Brunswick. I believe that's in Canada.
Yep.
And a terrible tragedy happened. He was an inventor. A terrible tragedy happened in New Brunswick. The SS Royal Albert, in very thick fog, went down. and he could hear it happening. He could hear the ship letting off their cannons, but he felt helpless to guide them. So this became the motivation for him to invent the steam foghorn. And do you know the reason why foghorns have such a low tone?
That does that actually carry farther than the high tones?
That is right.
Mm-hmm.
And myth has it that he would walk home along the cliff to his house, which was also on a cliff, and his daughter would, in the summer, practice her piano. And he could hear her playing as he walked along the cliff, but he could only hear the low notes. If it was a foggy day, he could only hear the low notes, and this triggered something for him, and he realized that low notes carry much better through the fog. Mm-hmm. So this is for Robert Fowlis and his invention, which in this poem, which is in 4 parts, is a flight of fancy, and it uses the metaphor of, I often think when I look at a foghorn, I don't know if you have these big old steam foghorns on your lighthouses in America.
We did.
Yes.
Not many still exist, but yeah.
No, there's a few exist here. There's one at the Ardnamurchan Lighthouse. There's one at Kinnaird Head at Fraserburgh.
Mm-hmm.
They all, to me, they look like something like a bull. So I've kind of characterized the foghorn as a bull in this poem. It's called the Foghorn Quartet. First part, Days We Were Blind. The silence of the veil, the voluminous train of a cold, damp bride, come from these blank mansions, voiceless waves, still dangerous. That carotid sound thumping in our ears, thumping. Barnacle Bill out there is suddenly blind and is in no mood for singing. Time to rattle the cans, time to stoke the beast, time to unleash he who is discomforted, our own pet conscience, our own lone voice. When the blanket comes down, out comes the bull. Why the bull cried. Moving through the wool, your Vedic hymn, plaintive, low, basso profundo. Fowlis's boy, squat and red, he ain't backing down, searching for the moon, yearning for the stars, untamed Taurus, bellowing upon his constellations, for Aldebaran, the bull's eye, for Hyades and Pleiades, for the Crab Nebula, his children lost in the fog. Where have you gone? Where have you gone? Meanwhile, in limbo, if you are thinking no one is listening, think again. The eyeless world is straining to hear his braying prayer, all pathos and regurgitation. Their lives depend upon his low droll through the roiling fret. A ship sailing blind is a ship on the edge of his mercy. He warns them off, away from stone teeth, safe into harbour. Robert Fowlis, inventor of the steam foghorn, came home along the cliff through a Canadian ha. Perhaps Claire de Lune played at the French window by his daughter, the light of his life. Somewhere ahead, she played so well. and he noticed that carrying through the opaque air, penetrating the fog, were the low notes. And he stood there listening, absently brushing the silver damp from his sleeve, those anchoring low tones, like existence, like the sadness of love. Inside this moment, he knew how to speak to the boats. He used one steam, one fog to combat another.
Interesting.
Amazing story. He didn't really see much money for his invention, I believe.
That sounds
Though
about
it
right.
saved thousands of lives.
Yeah. I just got to mention, you mentioned Claire de Lune in there.
Yeah.
That music was going through my head when I woke up this morning. I have no idea why. Maybe a little premonition.
It's all connected. It's all
It is.
connected. It's quite emotional reading these poems. I haven't read some of these for a long time.
Yeah, there's a lot of emotion in them. Yeah.
Yes, and you can get overtaken by it if you're not careful. Which brings me on to my local lighthouse, which I live near a little coastal town called Arbroath, famous for its Arbroath smokies, which are like kippers. I don't know if you get them in Maine.
I wish we did. You know, one thing you have over there that's pretty common is smoked haddock, which I love, but you can't get that here.
That's what an Arbroath smoky is a smoked haddock.
It is the same thing. Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
But my local lighthouse is the Bell Rock. I say local because it's 11 miles out to sea on a reef that is only visible at low tide. And over the years, that reef, before there was a lighthouse there, and before there was a bell there was actually a bell there before, put there by a bishop to warn ships in the fog. But the bell was stolen, unfortunately, by a pirate who wanted the ships to crash on the reef. Anyway, one of the first ever lighthouses built by the Northern Lighthouse Board to counter all these wrecks was the Bell Rock, which was, now let me consult my notes. The Bell Rock was finished in 1811, and it took 4 years to build. It was only able to be built at low tide in the summer, so that's why it took so long. No lives were lost in the making of it, though. One day, the support ship, which all the men working on the rock used to go home in, slipped its anchor, and they were stranded. But luckily, a passing fishing boat picked them up. Anyway, so the Bell Rock is this amazing lighthouse. It's on the front of my book.
Yes.
That's it at high tide. You can't see any. You can't see the terrible reef that is under there, and any passing ship that didn't know it was there was just taken out by it. Anyway, one of the lighthouse keepers on the Bell Rock was called J.M. Campbell, and he wrote a book which was amazing. It covered the ornithology, the marine biology, the meteorology, the flora and the fauna of things that occurred on the rock. Now, he might have had a good eye for nature, but he didn't have a necessarily humane eye for nature. And I read his book, and I condensed it down into a series of cantos. Cantos are short parts of a larger poem. And I'll read you a few of J.M. Campbell's thoughts, and it just gives you a real flavour of the human side of lighthouses and the men who lived on them and the things they saw and heard. So this is this is not all of them, but it's a flavour of the cantos of J.M. Campbell, who wrote a book about being a keeper on the Bell Rock, which actually came out in 1904. Being appreciated for what we do, A silver-mounted briar pipe has been sent by James Coates Jr. from Paisley to all as a gift. I will smoke in the library as I read about the world and try to ignore the thundering waves that make the whole building shudder. Carrier pigeons, lost in a haze, blown off course, puffed up and blinking, they find rest on my balcony. I hold them, feed them, send them into a washing day sky with a message. One went to Warwickshire. A letter of thanks was received, enclosed a small consideration for my kindness to the bird. Butterflies. Butterflies come in summer, press-ganged by the west wind. Nights when they rest on the glass. Days when painted ladies and red admirals, stronger than they seem, go on their way, perhaps to Asia or the Africas. Bestowal. I woke today, the sea all around the reef bobbed with apples. I rescued a few for a pie. Jellyfish. Jewels of the sea, a living piece of ocean. Myriads of medusae are constantly streaming past our door, apparently without powers of volition. In a storm, we are unreachable. We could be the last three men. Comfortable, though, drinking tea, watching the spray streaming down the glass. Believe me when I tell you, driving seas which roared and sang a lullaby, scarcely compatible with the shore dweller's sense of security. The morning after. Beware the long, curly-headed combers of the after swell. Bringing in the washing. Migrating birds mash against the glass. One morning we filled a washing basket with bodies. Blackbirds, redwings, pigeons are made ready for the pot. Beats tack beef hands down. Once an owl came and slept on the balcony. We fed him a live wren. Music to work by. Pleasure steamers out of Dundee come to visit 100 yards off the reef. One day someone brings a cornet and plays us an air. Another time it's the drums and pipes. We raise flags as thanks. I'll do one last one. Hermit crabs. Do you know what a hermit crab is?
I do.
It's
Yeah, we have them here. Yeah.
Oh, great.
People have them for pets here even.
Oh, okay. Well, they won't like this. Hermit crabs. Nutcrackers from the kitchen to break 6 tiny dog whelks. Out they come like minuscule lobsters, placed naked in a white china soup bowl with a little seawater. I added 4 empty shells and watched a crustacean crusade of eviction and counter-eviction. So you can see his attitude to animals was a bit iffy.
Yeah.
It gives you a flavour of what it was like, and the work that went into this little book is quite amazing. I believe he was only on the Bell Rock. They used to move the lighthouse keepers around so they didn't stay in one place too long. I believe he was only on the Bell Rock for about 4 years before he was moved somewhere else, because you didn't really want a job where you spent 2 weeks at sea and then 2 weeks at home. If you could spend all your time at home because your lighthouse was on the cliff rather than on an island.
Yeah.
So they moved them around to be fair to them and to stop, humans getting on each other's nerves.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to finish now. with a poem about the nature of the lighthouse keeper's service as I saw it. It was very hard to interview ex-lighthouse keepers, A, because a lot of them are now deceased, but B, because they treated it a bit like a secret service. They were all ex-military, and I think they had the attitude, what happens on the light stays on the light. And they weren't really willing to. I interviewed about three, and they didn't really want to spill the beans on the real things that happened on lighthouses, which is a shame, but I respect that. But another thing I noticed was they had to abide by a lot of rules. And there were lots of things you could and couldn't do on a lighthouse. So I kind of made a poem about that. Things you need to know when you listen to this poem. Back in the day, a lighthouse, the actual light was sat on a bed of mercury so that it could revolve without any resistance, which health and safety would just not allow that these days. And the mercury itself, the spare mercury, was kept under the principal lighthouse keeper's bed. Again, not a good thing for your health. The other thing you need to know for this poem is they were worked on a clockwork weights mechanism that was hung down the middle of the spiral staircase. And you had to turn a handle, I think it was 93 times, in order to make the light move for 1 hour. So you need to know that for this poem, 93 turns of the handle. The only other number that's pertinent in here is the headquarters of the Northern Lighthouse Board was at number 84 George Street in Edinburgh, and they just used to refer to it as number 84. And the rest is kind of a flight of fancy. There's quite a few mentions of different names of lighthouses. There's the Skerries, there's the Bell Rock, there's the Chicken Rock. They all get a mention in here. So this is called Lighthouse Nose, as in N-O, no. Lighthouse Nose. No scrimshaw, no shore leave, no swallows, no swifts, no polishing your sextant in the middle of your shift, no nudism, no nihilism, no nighttime pranks, no emptying your tanks off the balcony, no sherry on the Skerry, no bells on the Bell Rock, no stopping at the start, no talking back while the principal is speaking, no walking out when there's nowhere to walk to, no breaking wind and blaming it on a small pocket of air in the foghorn, no strange food that isn't to be found in Mrs. Beeton's cookbook, no baiting your colleagues while baiting your hooks, no dirty looks, no lions, no sleeping on the job, no 92 turns of the handle when you know darn well it's 93. No disrespect for number 84, the only number that matters. No Chinese shadow plays on a very grand scale. No forgetting about midnight or checking the weather. No messages in a bottle to a girl named Heather. No jokes about the men on the Chicken Rock. No sheep in the bedrooms. No sheep anywhere without specific permission. No navel-gazing, stargazing, sunbathing. And definitely no coveting the mercury under the principal's bed.
You know, I had to keep myself muted as you read that because I was laughing so much. I find that one hysterically funny.
Yes, it's a never-ending fount of knowledge and just interesting stories and facts from lighthouses. I feel very privileged that I was allowed to study in the Lighthouse Museum's archives. It's just an amazing chapter in my life.
Yeah, yeah. The thing about mercury, you probably heard the word wikis, old word, at least in this country, was an old word for lighthouse keepers, wikis, because they trimmed the
No, I
wicks all
haven't
the
heard
time.
that.
Maybe you didn't use it over there, but yeah, wikis, and I've heard it said wacky wikis because of the mercury fumes getting to them. So you had wacky
Ah,
wikis.
yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, there was a novel written by a student in the 70s who was a temp on a lighthouse, and he does tell some of the more outrageous stories
Hmm.
about one lighthouse keeper who was a nudist and about the excessive drinking that went on in some places.
Hmm. Also, it
So,
reminds me a bit of the movie The Lighthouse. Did you see that a few years ago?
yes,
Yeah.
yes,
They're drinking kerosene, I believe, in that. And you remember the Willem Dafoe character, the keepers.
yes.
There's a little bit of nudity in there.
That's quite a dark film, isn't it?
It's very dark.
But there's another one about the Flannan Islands
Yes.
disaster.
Yeah.
And that, have you seen that movie?
I saw the movie. It's very loosely based. I mean, of course, we don't know exactly what
No,
happened.
we just don't know, do we?
Yeah. Yeah. Which is a fascinating subject in itself.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, it's such a treat hearing you read these poems yourself.
It's been a treat reading them. Thank you for asking.
Oh, you're so welcome. I'm so glad I discovered you. I can't even remember now. I've known about your poems, about you for a while, and thought, wow, I really should have him on the podcast. But I'm glad it worked out. So, just a couple of questions in closing here. You've kind of touched on this before, but a lot of people are afraid of poetry, or I think they're afraid of, reading it or listening to it. They think they might not understand it. What do you say to them?
I think there is poetry that nobody understands, but there's also an awful lot of poetry that is very accessible and just written as if it's in spoken language. And for example, I was talking about Billy Collins earlier. I mean, I defy anyone not to understand a Billy Collins poem. They're just so conversational. And it's like music. It's like saying, I don't like music. How can you not like music? There's so many different varieties and so much available. Um, I think what I find from my class is that a lot of people were put off at school by poetry. The older generation, even older than I, in their 70s and 80s, were forced to recite poetry that rhymed over and over, and they can still recite it today. And that's quite an amazing feat.
Yeah.
Um, and then, I don't know, in this country, poetry doesn't come to the fore like I think it probably does in America, actually. Um, it's kind of seen as a bit posh and a little bit uh, Oxford and Cambridge when it isn't really. There is that side of it, but there's, as I say, there's so much to dip into and so much, with all these discussions about truth that we're all having these days, where truth has been kind of thrown out the window. The place where I find the most truth is in poetry, to be honest with you. And what I mean by that is I can read something and I can understand what that person feels or
Hmm.
is showing me about the world.
Yeah. Emotional truth.
Yes,
Well said, and that applies to art, visual art as well, paintings. Same
indeed.
thing. People think they don't like modern art, but there's such a wide range. I think some of it's more
Absolutely.
accessible than others, just like poetry. Yeah.
And it's just about maybe that the powers that be like to keep it for themselves, like to think it's a middle class thing or a upper class thing when it's not. It's not at all.
Yeah. So why do you think lighthouses are a good subject for poetry?
Well, they're on the edge of things. They're always in beautiful spots. They've got that sense of history, that sense of mystery when you visit them now. A lot of them are ruined, or they have the ruins of the lighthouse keepers' cottages nearby, or the ruins of the stations that used to supply them. I remember going to one called Glass, which is on off the Isle of Harris. You go across a bridge onto another island called Scalpay, and you do a 5 mile walk to this lighthouse called Glass. And the view you get from Glass, looking out into the Outer Hebrides, seeing all the other islands, and you're in a beautiful place. The day I've been there a few times, but it always seems to be beautiful weather. They're just so spiritually nourishing, these places, I find, in this crazy world. It's good to get away and just be somewhere.
Yeah. Last night, I interviewed 3 people who are working with the Point Vicente Lighthouse in Southern California. And what you just said reminds me so much of what they were saying. They're near Los Angeles, and there are terrible wildfires there in recent years. And they said after the some of the people who actually lost their homes or whatever came to the lighthouse to kind of get a sense of peace with all that happening. So that's the kind of thing it means to people too.
One of my earliest memories, my parents had a cottage in Wales, which is a country on the west coast of England. And from this cottage, you could look out to sea, and at night, you could see the lighthouse beam going across the bay. And as I slept in my bed, the lighthouse beam would play across the ceiling and lull me to sleep. I don't know why I've never written a poem about it, actually, but it was a lot of the things you like, I think, are germinated when you're a child, aren't they?
Oh, yeah.
Something comes into you that you take up as an adult.
I have one final question for you, and this one's for bonus points, okay? That question is, if you could sum up your feelings for lighthouses, your thoughts about lighthouses in could be a single word or a single line of poetry, what springs to mind?
Oh, that's a difficult one. I think I have to probably go back to my original poem that I wrote about the Ardna Merkin. There's a star at the top.
It's
that light. It's the light. You have to see a lighthouse at night, I think.
My wife has said that, some lighthouses obviously have been deactivated. There's no light anymore. And my wife once said a lighthouse without a light is like it doesn't have a soul.
Yes.
Yeah. They're still
very
interesting, but it's not quite the same thing.
Yeah. Now when they build a lighthouse, it's like a lamppost, isn't it? That's all they need is a lamppost with a light on the top of it and a solar panel.
Yeah, there's no need to build traditional lighthouses anymore.
No.
Yeah, that's why we need to preserve the ones that are left.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. Knotbrook Taylor, this is what a treat to talk to you, to meet you via Zoom.
I've really enjoyed it.
These poems.
It's been really good fun.
Well, thank you so much, and I hope we can do it again sometime, possibly as a video version. I mean, a video and audio.
I would love to.
People can see you read these poems, which I think
that would be really
adds
good.
a lot to it. Yeah. So thank you for spending this time with me. I really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed this chat with Knotbrook Taylor as much as I did. I'm grateful he shared his time, along with his love of words and his love for lighthouses. A reminder to check out uslhs.org to learn more about the U.S. Lighthouse Society. I will be helping to lead a Down East Maine tour in June. There are still spaces left. You can read all about it on the website under Travel. Next Thursday, February 26th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, we are doing the first ever live streaming episode of this podcast. It'll be live streamed on YouTube, and the subject will be Cape Henry Lighthouse in Virginia. You can find out how to be part of it on the front page of the USLHS website. The audience will have the chance to chat and ask questions. I think it'll be a lot of fun. It'll also be posted in audio and video versions soon after the 26th. Until next time, to all our regular listeners and our new ones, thank you so much for listening, and keep a good light.